The Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful empires in history. In its golden age in the early 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire reached the zenith of its power and prosperity, being feared by almost all European nations. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the same European nations attributed the nickname of the Sick Man of Europe to this once powerful empire, mostly due to a decline in the economy, prestige, and power projection of the Ottoman state. However, is the painting of the Ottoman Empire as a terminally ill man by Eurocentric historians really accurate? This is the historiographer, and in this video, we will respond to the harmfully reductionist Sick Man of Europe theory concerning the fall of the Ottoman Empire by exploring Ottoman decline in the 19th century. It is important to note that the Sick Man term was coined by an enemy of the Ottomans, Russian Tsar Nicholas I, during discussions with Austrian Prince Metternich in 1833. Interestingly, Metternich disagreed with this characterization, fearing that his own country, Austria, would be dubbed the Sick Man of the Danube. Observing maps of Europe from 1815 onwards through each decade of the 19th and early 20th centuries, one would notice the gradual contraction of the territories held by the Ottoman Empire. This gradual decline may have created the perception of a sick man, despite the empire's weaknesses not being substantially more pronounced than those of, for instance, Russia or Austria-Hungary. Both Russia and Austria-Hungary collapsed relatively quickly, with a dramatic end caused by the First World War, thus avoiding the impression of an enduring, long-term illness. Even then, Russia was referred to as sick by the New York Times in 1917. The reality is that any empire that has the privilege of declining for 300 years should consider itself lucky. It is also important to note that many countries in history were labeled as sick men of Europe. For example, Russia in 1917, France in the 1950s, Great Britain in the 1960s and 70s, Germany in the 1990s, and even today, in 2024, by sensationalist news headlines. The point being made here is that the term Sick Man of Europe has practically little meaning apart from a sensational overgeneralization of a complicated situation, where it paints an unnecessarily bleak picture of an impending doom. Now that the term Sick Man of Europe has been addressed, it is important to understand the history of the factors that led to the Ottoman Empire's decline to get a much more balanced view of the situation. Militarily, in 1622, the Janissaries, which were an elite standing army initially established to serve the Ottoman Sultan, led a coup to depose Sultan Osman II. What followed was a period marked by increasing concessions made to appease the Janissaries, which by this point had become much like Rome's kingmakers, the Praetorian Guard. It wasn't until Mahmud II's successful anti-Janissary coup in 1826 that the sultans regained their operational freedom. Mahmud II crushed the Janissaries in the auspicious incident, where more than 4,000 Janissaries were massacred by artillery shells in Constantinople, replacing them with a new army established along the western system. Although Mahmud II's new army was better than the Janissary Corps, it failed against rising threats from the Greek rebellion, as well as the better-led Egyptian forces under the ambitious Muhammad Ali Pasha of Egypt. After being rattled by Egyptian forces in the First and Second Ottoman-Egyptian Wars, the modern Ottoman army was finally established in 1842 under the reign of Sultan Abdulmajid I. The Crimean War was the first war effort in which the modern army took part in, proving itself as an excellent force. With significant support from Prussian military advisors and equipment, this new Ottoman army was an entirely revamped fighting force. An important example is the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78, where the Ottoman army performed better than expected against a 500,000-man strong coalition led by Russian forces. Looking at equipment, the Ottoman military boasted considerable armament, with 75% of its troops being furnished with the British-made 1871 Henry Martini rifles, known for their accuracy for up to 1600 meters. Prior to the conflict, 300,000 rifles had been either procured directly or reverse engineered in Ottoman war factories. Meanwhile, the Russian forces were equipped with the Krinka rifle, accurate to only 550 meters, and Russia's artillery was hopelessly outdated. What cost the Ottomans the 1878 war was the incompetent political and military leadership. Politically, there were internal power struggles between the newly established Ottoman parliament, especially as this parliament was controlled by a corrupt military junta, the Young Ottomans. This caused a lack of unified command in the war against Russia and the ultimate defeat of the empire in 1878. Still, under the leadership of Osman Pasha, the Ottomans were able to hold up for more than 5 months against the combined might of Russian and Romanian troops at the town of Plevna, giving the Russians a bloody nose. After the war, Sultan Abdulhamid II, initially placed by the Young Ottoman junta as a puppet, blamed the parliament for the defeat, closing it off and establishing more than 3 decades of his absolutist rule. His reign was both a blessing and a curse for the empire. While he was able to regain balance, establish a strong central government, fully modernize the Ottoman army with German help in 1880, play off other stronger powers against each other, and establish the first Ottoman secret intelligence agency, he failed in other aspects such as political compromise with internal opposition. He was also the Sultan who lost most territory in Ottoman history, though most of it would be lost in 1878 at the start of his reign. In any case, in 1897, the lesser-known Greco-Turkish War would erupt over the status of the island of Crete. The modernized Ottoman army and navy defeated the Greek armies on the Thessaly and Epirus fronts. Greece was hence forced to pay war reparations and cede some Thessalian lands to the Ottomans. However, the Sultan was not able to capitalize on his victory due to the intervention of the great powers to the side of Greece, forcing the victorious Ottoman armies to accept minimal gains. This war restored some of the prestige of the Ottoman state, which directly contradicts the sick man of Europe myth. During the Hamidian era, which lasted for 3 decades from 1876 to 1908, there were large-scale infrastructure reforms which included large spendings in railway, the development of a European-style judiciary system, and modern bank reforms in the Ottoman Central Bank. The Sultan's advocacy for education led to the establishment of 18 professional schools, with the pinnacle being the establishment of Istanbul University in 1900. Further, he implemented an extensive network of primary, secondary, and military schools across the empire. These educational reforms during the Hamidian era aimed to resist foreign influence, incorporating European teaching methods in secondary schools while nurturing a strong sense of Ottoman identity and Islamic principles among students. Abdul Hamid also revamped the Ministry of Justice and advanced the infrastructure by expanding the telegraph system to the farthest corners of the empire. Throughout his reign, the railway network within the Ottoman Empire expanded, integrating Ottoman-controlled Europe and Anatolia with Constantinople. This enhanced mobility and communication bolstered the Sublime Ports Authority. By 1883, railways linked Constantinople and Vienna, and the Orient Express soon connected Paris to Constantinople. The Hejaz railway line was completed by 1908. It is worthy to note that the Ottomans were inspired by the sudden rise of Japan. In his book titled Sick Man of Europe or Japan of the Near East, historian René Weringer provides a more nuanced view of the reinvigorated empire by the late 1890s, where he quotes the Ottoman fascination with Japan from an Ottoman newspaper. The Japanese government, adorned with great intelligence and ideological fairness and progress, has implemented and promoted European methods of commerce and industry in its own country, and has turned the whole of Japan into a factory of progress. While it is true that the Ottoman state was hampered by economic setbacks, such as the bankruptcy of 1881, it still managed to pay off a significant portion of its debts, and the trajectory indicated that the empire was on course to completely rid itself of the Ottoman public debt administration by 1935. However, the Balkan Wars, the Italo-Turkish War over Libya, and the outbreak of World War I shattered the economic stability that the Ottomans had painstakingly regained by the end of the 19th century. Historians have internally criticized Ottoman economic policies, sometimes rightfully, though occasionally inaccurately, for inhibiting industrial and agricultural growth. Since the 15th century, the Ottomans willingly granted economic concessions, known as capitulations, to Europeans, including trade rights and ownership of profitable industries. Unlike the unequal treaties imposed on East Asian nations in the 19th century, these were voluntarily conceded by the Ottomans. The capitulations brought in hard cash and capital into the empire, though they inhibited further growth in the long term. As a result of this ongoing policy, key sectors of the Ottoman economy, including Turkish tobacco, diamond mining, and some industries, as well as major railway lines, came under European ownership. Additionally, low tariffs, as low as 3% for the French, as compensation for France's help in the Crimean War, allowed French interests to gain further concessions from the Ottomans. This dominance of the capitulation system suppressed local Ottoman companies, hindering their economic development due to European control of Ottoman markets. Nevertheless, by 1908, thanks in part to Abdul Hamid II's later policies, the economy began to recover, and native Ottoman industries started to flourish. However, in 1913, a significant blow to Ottoman stability occurred with the catastrophic loss of practically all territories in the Balkans after the First Balkan War. Despite modern nationalist propaganda, the Ottoman Balkans were not mere colonies, but they were the true heart of the empire. The First Balkan War expelled the Ottomans from most of the Balkans, resulting in the loss of approximately 45% of their industrial base. This disruption destroyed the economic progress that the empire had achieved since the late 19th century. Despite enduring several setbacks, such as the Balkan and Italian wars, the Ottomans were already showing signs of recovery by 1914. Small emerging industries were beginning to take shape, and the Ottomans had opened up a new credit market. As we can see, the situation is vastly different from a dying man waiting to be buried. During Suleiman the Magnificent's era, and until the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was a haven for Christians, Jews, and even a few Hindus and Buddhists from India. Traditionally, the army officers were Turkish, merchants were mostly Greek, Anatolian craftsmen and artisans were largely Armenian, and Orthodox Slavs served as the predominant farmers of the empire. This social arrangement had functioned effectively for centuries, promoting a sense of harmony. The division of labor ensured efficiency, and the system remained flexible, allowing Armenians, for instance, to pursue careers as officers if they desired, rather than being restricted to their artisan roles. However, by 1820, this had changed. The rise of nationalism tied certain religions to specific ethnic groups as part of their identity. Orthodox Christianity became central to Greek and Bulgarian nationalism. Despite efforts by reform-minded sultans like Selim III, Mahmud II, and Abdul Majid I, nationalism could not be quelled. It is important to note that nationalism's support amongst the local population was weaker than many contemporary historians suggest, and foreign support is the cause for the success of the nationalist rebellions. The economic and political interests of the foreign powers pushed them to support rebelling minorities, thereby creating new weak nation-states that were forever indebted to the major powers, with an important example being Greece in 1826. What the Ottomans needed best was isolation to do their own reforms, without a foreign power trying to poke them. The situation in 1828 fundamentally changed and made sure that the Russians now had a semi-ally in Greece, which made Russian meddling in the Ottoman Empire more likely than not, such as supporting Armenian separatists in the 1890s. The Ottoman Empire mainly pursued a policy of personal principle, where measures aimed at ethnic groups like the Armenian Constitution of 1863 and the Slavic Memorandum of 1869 garnered support from minorities. Foreign influence, however, fueled nationalism, with biased reports exaggerating tensions, thereby disrupting Ottoman reforms. Napoleon III, for instance, coerced the Ottomans into signing treaties proclaiming him as the defender of Catholic minorities, leading to the Crimean War and dispute with Russia, which devastated the economy and laid the groundwork for the War of 1877 to 78, and Abdul Hamid's absolutism. Further, Russia's support for Armenian organizations, which initially carried out massacres against Turkish villages, prompted the Hamidian massacres in the 1890s, which were a series of retaliatory disproportionate attacks by pro-Ottoman Kurdish bands on Armenian villages. In an effort to combat nationalism, Abdul Hamid adopted a pan-Islamist policy. This worked well, as Islam was a unifying factor for the vast majority of the state's population of Turks, Arabs, Kurds, and Muslim Albanians and Bosnians. However, against the backdrop of a rise in nationalism between the other minorities, there was now rising reactionary support for the pan-Turkish Young Turks Party, which opposed the Ottoman Sultan. The Sultan was completely overthrown in 1909 after the 1908 Young Turks Revolution, causing other ethnicities to rebel in the first previously aforementioned Balkan War of 1912. Despite this fact, the label of the sick man of Europe remains misleading, as the city of Edirne was reclaimed from Bulgaria in 1913, reversing Ottoman losses, and stability had been achieved by 1940. If there is ever a historical moment that well and truly dictated the end of the Ottoman state, it would have to be the completely unnecessary Ottoman involvement in World War I. Certainly, Enver Pasha signed the empire's death warrant by involving it in the First World War in October of 1914, and from there, the Ottoman state would go into an irrecoverable downward spiral. In conclusion, it is undeniable that the Ottomans experienced a relative decrease in power during the 19th century, despite some military achievements, a decline mainly attributed to a policy that surrendered economic development and profits to foreigners through the capitulation system and its subsequent foreign debt management counterpart, the ascension of Balkan and Armenian nationalism, constant interference by foreign entities in domestic Ottoman affairs, creating tensions that would lead to horrific interethnic violence. The Ottoman Empire's decline was much like Rome's decline, where the factors listed in the video compounded together all at once to bring down a once powerful empire. History is much more complex, and it does not deserve to be dismissed via painfully reductionist labels such as the sick man of Europe. That prevents us from properly exploring its intricacies. It is important, therefore, to challenge the harmfully generalized label that the Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe, as it propagates the misconception that the empire's death was well and truly inevitable by the 19th century, which wasn't entirely the case. If you like this video, then consider subscribing to Spread History. This has been the Historiographer, and for now, see you in the next video.